Chair, we are now live on YouTube.
Okay, good evening and welcome to members and officers to this Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, and welcome to those who may be watching YouTube as it's being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel. Before the meeting actually starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to confirm that the officers joining remotely can hear and be heard.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Nick Jennings.
Yes, I can hear.
Thank you. Ruben Ayavu.
Yes, I can hear.
Thank you. And Ian Cooper.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. We have one apology for absence from Adam Ruggiero Chaka. There's no substitute on that, so we'll just move ahead. The minutes you will have had circulated, unless anybody's seen any glaring errors in them, I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 23rd of June 2021. May I have a seconder? Thank you. Seconder.
Thank you. We're just going to vote on that now. If you want to use your... Yes.
Sorry, put my microphone on. There was a point, it said we would look happy to reword e-tendering systems to be able to transmit to new government e-procurement system. It was that we would be able to transmit to both new or both procurement systems. There is two, one for high value, one for low value. It was just, if anyone goes back and looks later, it would look a little odd if we said that we're only posting to one. So it's a minor point, but it's Finder Tender Service as well as Contracts Finder.
Okay, well spotted.
Minor point, but it's just that.
Okay, thank you. If you wish to vote now, please.
I think it's passed anyway. I don't think we'll record you twice. We're not a rotten borough, are we? So okay, then moving on, we have no notification of other business. Chair's announcements, just to welcome Sean Prendergast officially tonight, who's replaced Sam Collins on the committee. So welcome, Sean. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest, members are reminded to make these before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. There is no public participation this evening, so we can go on straight on to item 6, which is the anti-fraud report. I'd like to welcome the head of Shared Anti-Fraud Service, Nick Jennings, to present. Thank you, Nick. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Nick.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, my report this evening is the annual anti-fraud report. It's a report that we produce every year for the council. It explains how the council has been protecting public funds, preventing fraud, preventing corruption, bribery, all those other things that go along with it. And that report is based on the anti-fraud plan that we put in place at the beginning of 2020. And if you flick through the report, you'll see that we've towards the end on page 27 is Appendix A. That's our report for our plan, I should say, for 2020-21. And the report just details how we've achieved each of the things that we set out to in the plan for last year. I'm not going to go through the plan in a great deal of detail. I'm happy to take questions from members, but I'll just point out a few highlights, I suppose, really, just on section 2, delivery of the plan. We certainly made a decision very early last year, and those audit committee members that were with us at the time may remember that following the COVID pandemic, the start of that pandemic in March 2020, we made a decision that we would stick to the plan that we put in place, but look more at prevention and how we could help the authority deal with those new and emerging fraud risks that we've seen linked to the national, regional and local response to COVID. So we worked very, very closely with officers, looking at the grant schemes that the officers were administering quite early on from April 2020 to ensure that we limited the opportunity for people to commit fraud, and if fraud was committed, we stopped it getting through the gateways that officers put in place. And on those very, very rare occasions that fraud actually managed to get through those systems, we were able to investigate it and recover funds for the authority. So that was much of our focus last year, was looking at those grants. And a lot of the advice that was coming out from a variety of organisations, including SIPFA, CIFAS, National Audit Office, MHCLG, about those new fraud trends that we were seeing that were focused on taking advantage of the council's response to COVID and how it dealt with that, continued to provide its services. So lots of advice out to officers about what to look out for. Investigations last year, our referrals dropped off at the beginning of the year. So referrals are people reporting fraud into us. No great surprise during the lockdown that the people's first thought wasn't to report fraud, and officers as well, working from home in the way they were at the time, were focused very much in delivering frontline services. So we saw a drop off in referrals. Excuse me. We ran a couple of publicity campaigns in August and November, just to remind officers and staff to report fraud if they suspected it. Those campaigns were very successful, and we did see an increase in the second half year in reported fraud into the service. And overall, as members will see from tables in the report, tables 1, 2 and 3, we sort of returned to the levels that we'd seen in previous years of alleged fraud. It's very important that we're clear about that. This is not fraud as such. It's where people suspect a fraud, it needs to be investigated. So we were quite happy with the levels of allegations that were being received into the service. Some of the other areas that we looked at, again with grants, we looked at housing applications, some of the historic housing applications that the authority had been dealing with, and also around benefits as well. That our ability to conduct investigations was significantly hampered last year. We joint work on lots of housing benefit CTRS cases, council tax support cases, where there's suspicions of fraud. We joint work those cases with the Department for Work and Pensions, and that department made a decision very early in 2020 that it needed to provide a national response to COVID around the universal credit scheme. So it moved lots of its frontline fraud investigation staff into delivery of universal credit, which meant we've had to suspend lots of our investigations that were live at the beginning of 2020, and new cases that come along again. We've sort of had to put those a little bit on the back burner, focus on cases that we could deal with quickly. Those that pose the greatest risk to the authority, and other cases just look to see if we could deal with those in a more a manner which didn't involve a full investigation. So contacting customers quite early to challenge the information that we were receiving. And that's essentially my report, Chair. There's two other things to mention. One, the SAF's KPIs are mentioned at section 3 of the report. Very happy to report to Audit Committee that we've managed to achieve all of the targets that were set for the service in 2021. And then at section 4, we have the transparency code data that the authority is required to provide around fraud and fraud data. So that information is contained in my report as well. And finally, at the end, we've got quite a long reading list for members. Apologies for that. You can pick and choose which of those you'd like to read. Some of it might be a little bit like bedtime reading, but some, such as the LGA guide for members, the workbook, the fraud and corruption workbook for members is always a good read, as is the latest strategy produced in partnership between SIPFA and CIFAS in early 2020, the strategy for local government encountering fraud and corruption. So commend those to members of the committee to read. But otherwise, Chair, that's my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick, very much. Yeah, there's certainly a selection of nighttime reading there, isn't there? Right, members, questions? Terry.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question if I can, please. On page 17, 210, item 210, table 1, types of fraud being reported. Other seems quite significant at 10. what sort of other, what is sitting in other? Are they anything to do with COVID related or something else?
They are this year, Councillor. Yes, we've seen lots of very minor COVID-related issues, so either around grants themselves or risk to staff in their home working environment. We also get lots of fraud reported into us, which actually doesn't affect the authority at all. So that's reported on. It might be reported directly to the Department for Work and Pensions or to the police or other organisations.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Any other comments? Yes, Adam.
Thanks, Chair. I was quite interested by case study 1 on page 18. So where we've got a double number of referrals in a given week, and 7.5 or 740% of the hits on the website. Did we notice any different referrals to normal? Was it very much of a muchness? I was just wondering if it was sort of bringing to the floor something that we don't normally get referrals on.
That's not a question I can answer, actually, Councillor. It's an interesting one. I'm happy to take that away to have a look at the referrals received in that week. We sort of pointed some campaigns around tenancy fraud, around blue badge abuse. There was some around benefits and very few about grants as such, because those grants were being paid to local businesses. There were quite small numbers in the numbers of applications being received. They're quite high values, clearly. So we didn't focus too much on grants because we sort of under, I think, quite a good. I think we had quite a good handle on what was going on with grants. What we were concerned about was reports from the public had dropped off, and what the public tend to tell us about is around benefits fraud, tenancy fraud. But more than happy to go away, do some analysis and feedback, Chair, if that's something members would find useful.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think that would be really good if we could get that back. While we're talking about grants, I think I would pay tribute to our own staff here who managed a huge amount of work with, it seems, remarkably little fraud reported in very swift time. So full credit to them as well. Any other comments or queries? No, in which case I think then that we can, I think the recommendation is to note, but I think I will vote on it anyway, because that's good. So can we accept the report of Nick Jennings this evening? Okay, that's good. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks again, Nick, for the report. We're now going to the annual governance statement, which will be presented by the Policy and Community Engagement Manager. So, Ruben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, committee members. As the Chair said, this is your opportunity to review the draft annual governance statement for 2020-21, to review and comment as appropriate before we finalise it for approval as soon as the Council's audit has been completed. I'm going to just pick out some key points from the report, really, mostly in the background, to say that at 7.1 it sets out the legislative requirement for us to complete an annual review on the effectiveness of the governance and controls that we have in the Council and to prepare an annual governance statement. It is for the committee to do this approval. And then at 7.3 it talks there about how we do this process. So we will take those the Local Government Framework 2016 and those 7 principles there and assess our governance structure. What has happened to this moment is that we conducted an in-depth review of all of the arrangements we have in the Council, and then the leadership team looked at that and made that assessment against those assurance level bases there. What you'll find at Appendix A is not the whole 119-page thing, but is a shorter, meaningful but brief communication of the key areas that we are reporting on. I'd also like to say that we have picked up the Head of Internal Audit's annual report, which was presented at the June meeting, so that's included there. And then just to sort of spin down to 10.1, where it says that normally I would come and get this approved and it would accompany the statement of accounts, but as noted there, that the audit of the Council statement of accounts will not commence until at least November. So it's giving you a bit more time to look at the draft, and then we'll approve that when such time is ready. And that's all I really wanted to say, Chair, but happy to take questions from the committee.
Thanks, Ruben. Yeah, I think I'm grateful that you didn't send us the whole 119 pages. Queries, questions, comments? I know we're constrained somewhat by the fact that we're not going to have an external audit done till November now, so this is going to come back at some point anyway. But is there anything in the meantime? No. Okay, then I'm going to move to the, there's a recommendation that we review and comment on the draft governance statement action plan in order for it to be finalised for approval as soon as possible after the council's external audit has been completed. So I will move that recommendation. Somebody care to second? Yeah, thank you, Claire. So if you could vote on that, please, bearing in mind this will come back to us. Thank you very much. And thank you once again, Ruben, for bringing that to us. So speeding on to item 8, which is the Shared Internal Audit Service review of the effectiveness of this committee. And I'm pleased to welcome our Service Director of Resources, Ian Cooper, to present.
Thank you, Chair. You remember from the last meeting that I presented the FAR annual report to you. This is SIAS's perspective on the similar sort of topic, to provide some reassurance that everything is working well. So fundamentally, the first main part of the report is just confirming that everything went to plan last year. The committee covered what it's supposed to cover. It operated legally and compliant and was compliant. I will skip through to the section in the appendix, section 4, which starts on page 63 of the pack. And this is some areas to think about for the coming year. This is mainly why I brought it to you to the meeting tonight, is to sort of have a discussion and view from you on which of these you want to take forward. So starting with 4.3, you'll be aware that we've spoke last time about having an independent member on the committee. Unfortunately, it's quite legally difficult, but I will progress that with the Service Director for Legal and Community to try and move that forward. And see if we can get that in place, hopefully for next year. In terms of committee business, in paragraph 4.4, you may remember from last time, I will continue to encourage you to come up with topics for this committee to discuss on top of the regular cycle of reports. There's scope for other things to be considered. Just bear in mind the usual thing about ensuring we find our place between this committee and overview and scrutiny. Paragraph 4.5 and 4.6, I'll remind you again about the email I sent after last time's meeting. So please complete the skills matrix training grid. That does allow me to put on some hopefully relevant training for you and find a way to do either remotely or in person at the right time. So please do that. And then there are some sort of, I suppose, more minor points from 4.7 through to 4.9 in relation to areas of the terms of reference to the committee that SIAS have also picked up. So I hope that's kind of an introduction to the report for you, but as always, happy to take any questions or comments from you members.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I must admit, I do struggle a bit with trying to find topics for us to discuss that don't overlap with overview, if you like. Are you waiting for many of us to complete the matrix about training?
Unfortunately, I've had 2 back so far, so still quite a few to go, please.
Okay, so if I can just add my voice to Ian Cooper's to ask members to complete that so that we can get some sensible training program in, really. Right, any other comments from?
Sorry, just on that note, can that be sent through to me, please, Ian, as well?
Yes, of course. Sorry, Councillor Prendergast. Yes, I'll get that sent over to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Terry.
I'm not terribly sure if I've completed it or not, so perhaps I might need a reminder. If I haven't, if I have, then don't remind me, Ian. But if I haven't, then please remind me.
I will do a reminder to all those that haven't completed it.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. There are an extraordinary number of emails that come to us, so some do miss out. Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, we are asked to. The recommendation is that the committee note and comment on the review of the effectiveness of ourselves. So I'll move that recommendation so that we can vote on it. Seconder?
Yeah.
Thanks, Claire. All right, if you could just vote on that, please. Okay, use it as preparation for this year. That's a good one. Our final item on this agenda is to possible agenda items for future meetings, and we're sort of a bit stymied, of course, with this audit not due now till November. I note we have 4 meetings left in this current civic year: September the 15th and December the 15th. January the 17th, March the 16th. Now, we did suggest last time that the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy Financial Management Code would be a riveting subject for a meeting to discuss. So in light of the fact that we're not going to get an audit till November, which may even be too late for the December meeting, I don't know, we'll have to just see. The CIPFA meeting could come in on the 15th, I suppose. We could talk about that then. I would suggest we leave the December one until we know whether we've got an audit or not. Is that okay? Does that meet generally with your approval? Okay, then we'll proceed on that basis, I think. And I'll worry about next year in December. We might find we're doing the audit one in January anyway. Okay, I think that's it. Any other points or any other business? I don't think there is. Let me just check. I think we're all done. Oh, Adam, sorry.
Sorry. It was just a quick one, really. If we go around and review what's actually coming up on the scrutiny committee, are we able to suggest some agenda items for the September meeting, given that the audit's not going to be back by then?
What, an item for this September meeting of this committee?
Yes.
Yeah,
are we able
please.
to sort of recommend something via email rather than during this meeting? I wasn't really sure of the governance process for that.
I think you can recommend something. I think it could then, we could then discuss it. We could almost just make our minds up by email. It's not as if there's a huge number of us, is there?
Perfect.
So if you've got a subject that would pique our interest, I think that would be.
No guarantees it will pique your interest, but
well, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy Financial Management Code is sounding fairly dry, so you haven't got to do a lot to pique my interest. Right, thank you very much, everybody, and that's the meeting adjourned. So thanks all for being here.